Hello Simmers, welcome to my channel Simsational Builds. In case you don't know, my name is Deb and thanks for joining me today for another tutorial. Today we're going to go over my tips and tricks for landscaping. This has been one of the most requested tutorials, but honestly I have really been procrastinating putting this together because, well, I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely hate landscaping. It is by far my least favorite part of building, but by now I have been building for long enough to have put together a few tips and tricks that have helped me, and I hope they will help you as well. So for the first part of this tutorial, we're going to be going over some general tips, and then we'll go into actually landscaping a build that I've put together for you guys. So first of all, you're going to have to enable your cheats. Now you're going to need move objects on bb.showhiddenobjects and bb.showliveeditobjects, with move objects being by far the most important one here. Now, when you're building your house or whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to want to place all of your large features first. So after you've actually built it, you're going to want to place all your pools, pathways, patios, alfrescos, pergolas, any play equipment or ponds. I have a pond here in this particular build, and I have a tutorial on my channel which I'll link up above for you guys as well if you want to see how I've done this one, but also anything else like fire pits and water features, etc. Now what this does is it creates less space for you to have to fill with plants and landscaping itself. It becomes a lot less daunting, other than just having, for example, in this lot here, just this big square of grass that you have to just fill up. Now I just have little areas, little patches that I have to landscape. So that's one of the biggest and easiest ways to split it up and make it what seems like a really big and overwhelming task a lot less daunting. The other thing you're going to want to do before you start actually putting down your plants is, if you wanted to, change your terrain. Now I'm not going to do a full terrain tutorial, this will make this far too long, but essentially down here in your UI you've got this icon here which is your terrain tools. If you click on that one there, and down the bottom you have your terrain manipulation. Here you can raise the terrain, lower it, smooth it, etc. Now there's a few different reasons you would use this. If you wanted to build your house on top of a hill, for example, or even if you're doing like a mountain or something like that. But also if you're doing a particularly large lot, sometimes it's nice just to add a few little undulations to the land itself. So for example, just adding a couple little hills or dips, just to make it look like it's not a flat piece of land. But I don't use this all the time, and for this particular tutorial I'm going to just leave it as is. But if you did want to do that, I would do that before placing down your plants as well. The other tip I have for you is to match your landscaping with the type of house or build that you've created. So for example, is it a cottage? If it is, you need something a lot more rustic with a lot more plants and flowers, etc. Is it more modern? In which case it's usually a lot more linear, a lot more structured, and often there's a lot more symmetry involved as well. Is it a castle? Is it a farm? Is it a mid-century? Is it Asian inspired? All of these have really unique styles that you need to match landscaping with, otherwise it's going to look disconnected. The other side as well is not only matching it to the build, but ideally, if you can, also try and blend it in with the surrounding landscaping as well, or your surrounding world. So this here is in Newcrest, which is, it's quite green and lush, so you'd want to ensure to use at least some plants that are around your landscaping as well. And again, that just helps your lot blend into the surrounding world and just makes it not look out of place. A good way to blend it in with the landscaping around it is to use debug plants. Now, to do that, after you've typed in your show hidden objects and show live edit objects, you can either in the search bar here type in the word debug, and then a list of debug will come up. Click on that and it will come up with debug items. Now that doesn't work for everyone, and it didn't actually work for me. What I did is, after I typed in my cheats, I just pressed the search bar, and what this does is bring up every single item that's within your game. So you're going to want to scroll down past your windows and doors, etc., and then it's going to bring up all the plants as well and all your debug items. Now I have a cheat installed called Better Build and Buy, and this doesn't actually work for me because with this particular mod it's allowed me to, and that's why I've got organized debug here, it has actually brought up separate debug and live edit objects in their own little sections here. But essentially when you get to the debug section, it's going to start to look like this, and you're going to have all these items that don't normally show up in your menu. And if you filter these by your pack, so for example this is your base game, it's going to bring up all the base game objects that are within that world. So now we have access to a whole bunch of plants that are not in your normal menu but actually match your world. So then you can start putting these ones down as well, to even if it's just on the peripherals of your lot, to blend it in with the surrounding world. The last very general tip that I have for you is to use reference images. If you're really struggling and you don't know how to do something, find a reference image. So the easiest way to do this is to go on Pinterest and have a search for example, landscaping floor plans, landscaping plans, design, landscaping layout, keywords like that. And what that's going to do is bring up pictures such as these ones here. And you can use these as a guide, or you can even try and copy them to a T, and they will just help you realize the look that you're going to go for. Now, when we're actually doing it, the biggest and most simple tip that I have for you when you're starting to landscape, when you've selected a item or a plant, is to hold down your Alt key. Now what happens is when you're not holding down your Alt key, your plant will snap to the grid, and therefore you will only have a limited number of places to put your plant. But when you hold down the Alt key, you now have free placement. So now you can easily put a plant down exactly where you want it, for example here surrounding this pathway there, rather than if it was on the grid, I wouldn't have the option to do it quite so neatly. The easiest, fastest way to fill up a blank space, say for example around here, I didn't want to put the fence around the entire lot, otherwise it's going to look a bit too big, a bit strange, is to do the tree with a shrub technique. Now this is a really, really simple one that a lot of people do, and it is by far the easiest. And here's one I prepared earlier. So start off with a tree, plant, a few little ground covers on the floor around it, add a couple of shrubs, add a couple of rocks, and put some terrain paint underneath it, and you have your tree with a shrub little feature. And the reason that this works is because you're putting all your items in a little clump. Clumps tend to work better than like randomly spaced out objects. So if you just ended up just getting, let's just pick a few random things and just randomly put them around, it's going to look a bit strange. But if you add them in clumps, it tends to look a lot more natural again. And even in your surrounding world, you can see that you've got here a tree with a shrub. This is a little bit larger one, tree with a shrub kind of thing going on. So it tends to work a little bit better than just placing objects randomly around. Another easy way to sort of work on your landscaping is by using hedges. Now, I'm not going to do that with this one because it won't actually achieve the look I'm particularly going for. But if you just select a hedge, a lot of times, again, not the right house for it, but if you surround your house with a hedge, that's a really easy way to do landscaping that doesn't really require a lot of thinking. So if you're doing something really quickly, or you don't want to spend too much time on your landscaping, things like that will, allow you to do it a lot faster. Now, because this particular lot is a cottage, the reason I chose to do a cottage is because it's probably one of the hardest things to landscape, because it's going to need the most areas to fill up. There tends to be a lot of plants, a lot of flowers. So again, keeping with that cottage vibe, I'm going to use this lavender, some grasses as well. They sort of match that sort of same tone. There's another piece of lavender that I'll use. I also want to use a couple of these bushes. Will look quite nice because they look a little bit more unkept. I don't want anything too structured, like these topiaries, for example. They just wouldn't suit what I'm going for. And I'll probably use a lot of these flowers from the Romantic Garden Pack because it does suit really well, and probably some sunflowers also. Now, you don't need to go through this first and pick out a few, but it can help because you want to pick out a handful of different plants and sort of repeat them around. You don't need to stick to that. Obviously, you can add to it if you feel like it's missing something, but you don't have to use every single plant and flower that's in your inventory. But you can see here that I'm going for more of an unkept look, again, with the roses and the lavender and things like that, rather than these really structured or really tropical type of plants as well. So when you're starting to do your landscaping and you're starting to place all of your larger items, it's nice to have some focal points around. And that's why I have this pond. I've put it a little water feature here, a seating area, and I've even included this little wishing well at the back as well. So like I said before, not only to break up the space, but also to add points of interest around your garden as well. When you're starting to landscape, I like to usually start around the house itself, and I like to start off with some bigger plants at the back and then smaller ones at the front. And what this is it just draws your eye towards the house, and again, it doesn't hide anything smaller at the back as well. So starting out with some of these bigger ones, again, using the Alt key, and not only using the Alt key, you're also going to want to rotate them slightly as well. In real life, plants don't all face the same way, and they're not all the same size. So using your square bracket key, you're also going to want to resize some of them just to, again, create that look of, that natural look. You can also change the swatch of a few of them to try and make them look a little bit more natural as well. In this particular lot, I'm going to stick with whites, purples and pinks rather than going for some crazy colors. Again, just to keep that look of consistency and stop it from looking too structured. You're also going to want to make sure that all your plants are a little bit random. Unless you're working on a really ultra modern lot, for example, where everything's going to be really balanced and structured and symmetrical. Usually speaking, more plants tend to be a lot more randomly placed, so it's good sometimes if you only have a few to put them in odd numbers when you're putting so many plants, so you don't need to sit there and count them all, but they don't at all need to be the same number on each side. You just want to make sure that if you are placing them randomly, that you have a bit of a balance. So you take a look, step back, look at it visually, make sure that you've got balance. And what I mean by balance is that there's sort of similar heights on both sides, similar amounts of color, similar amount of plants, things like that. Not symmetry, but balance. So I'm just going to head into a bit of a speed build here. Now this lot took me about 45 minutes in all to landscape, just sort of give you some sort of indication of time, because it can be really hard to tell with speed builds, and just so you have some sort of idea. Now I'm starting off with the largest plants, or trees in this case, and large shrubs near the backs or the peripherals of the lot, and then working my way inwards from there, making them smaller and smaller as I go. Now things to keep in mind, as I said before, now all of the plants are randomly placed. That's using your Alt key, again to make sure that they look as natural as possible. They're rotated as I go, so again to make sure that you don't have that uniformity going on, because obviously in real life all plants look slightly different, even if they're exactly the same type, planted the exact same time, etc. They're resized as I go as well. Some are a little bit bigger, some are a little bit smaller, again just to make it look more natural. They're repeated, and this is what you'll see here is I'm actually taking the same plant, and as I go around my lot I'm dotting that same plant around, just again to give that look of cohesion and to make sure that I'm not using too many plants, because this one is a bit of an exception to the rule, being a flower cottage, and this one uses a lot of flowers. But most of the time, in most builds, you won't need to use this many different types of plants. You can usually stick to a handful. And again, sticking to a similar sort of color palette. This one here, like I mentioned before, is mostly those pinks, purples and whites. Obviously there's a couple of other colors mixed in there as well, because I use a lot of those the small wildflowers, and they've got some oranges and things like that in there as well. But for the most part I'm sticking with the same colors, because otherwise, again, that's when you start having things look a little bit random, and again starting to look a little bit unnatural when you start using all different plants in all different colors, because it just starts to look a little bit too busy as well. So again, you can see there that I've got all the plants getting smaller and smaller as they reach the center, finishing off with those wildflowers and daisies in the middle as well. Now I'm just putting some plants around this pond that I've got here, and I'm making it look a little bit, almost a little bit messy, a little bit unkept. Again, being that it is more of this cottage sort of feel, I wouldn't do this to every single lot, and I definitely wouldn't do it to things like modern builds where you want that uniformity and even symmetry, whereas this one here I want it to look random, a little bit unkept, and just sort of that the flowers sort of sprouted out of the ground everywhere that they were. This particular lot is going to go up on the gallery after I post this tutorial. So my username is blondie-deb if you do like this particular cottage, and I've also got more pictures available on my Instagram page as well. So as I finish putting all the plants down, I'm now putting down some rocks. Now you can actually line your flower beds in rocks if you wish to actually create a flower bed, whereas again I'm keeping that sort of more unkept look. It blends in with my my pond as well. So again, making sure I rotate them, especially because we've only got so many different rocks to use, that if you start putting them all the same sizes, etc., it will definitely look too uniform. Now with the back of the lot, I'm not going to do full landscaping since the front is so heavily done. This one, I'm merely blending it into the surrounding world. So I'm using the exact same plants that are behind me in the world, and this is entirely using the debug catalog to make sure that they're as similar as possible. So again, making it as random as possible, same with the rocks, just to look like that it's part of the world itself. Last but definitely not least, in fact probably most important, is you want to start using your terrain paints. Now this is in your terrain tools in the UI, and I like to use the second one across for this particular for doing all my flower bits, I should say. So plants usually don't just grow out of the grass, they need to grow out of some sort of dirt or soil. So making sure that you put your terrain paint underneath all your plants, all your rocks, and I even, if I've got the time, like to actually edge my house in it as well. So just finishing off here. Now, thank you so much. This is the finished product. I hope you all have enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you've all managed to learn something today, and I hope this has been helpful. If you did enjoy this tutorial, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have any inquiries or any suggestions for future tutorials, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much everyone. Have a nice day.